Welcome to the Insomnia Stream. Merry Rowlandson edition. I'm your host, of course, Devin Stack. Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Did a stream a while back about Olive Oatman. You guys might, those of you in Odyssey chat might have remembered, because that's when apparently we really pissed off some hacker Indians, and not the feather kind, oddly enough. Freaking out about how about the things I was saying about how you shouldn't feel guilty about displacing Indians, that we were settlers and not immigrants. Although in researching tonight's topic, I found that they're actually changing the language in a lot of these research tools like Wikipedia and whatnot to from settlers to immigrants. And that the people, if you can call them that inhabited this continent when the white man came, were far from peaceful, far from noble, far from honorable. And yeah, I had no problem whatsoever about what had happened. In fact, I was kind of proud of it. And it seems as if this is permeating. I don't think because of my stream, but this idea is beginning to permeate out. In fact, I think for a totally different reason. It's permeated out, and even Matt Walsh apparently went viral a couple days ago for essentially saying the same things. Making the point that the inhabitants of this continent had 20,000 years to make something of a civilization, and instead they still lived in tents and still used spears and killed each other and practiced cannibalism. White men show up, and 200 years later we're walking on the fucking moon. And that clearly there's a difference. People went crazy about that, people on the left and the right. But it's true. It's true. And there are so many examples of this. This wasn't just an isolated incident, this Olive Oatman case that we talked about. And so I went looking into some of maybe the earliest cases where we had run-ins with Native Americans, aggrieved Native Americans, and the treatment received, the violence experienced by the settlers that came here to carve a civilization out of the wilderness. And it's funny because you don't have to wait too long after the pilgrims show up. They like to talk about, oh yeah, the Thanksgiving happened, all these stupid, like the story they tell you in school, the stupid white people showed up. They didn't know how to grow corn. And the Indians saved them all from starving. It didn't happen that way, but that's the story. The story is that stupid white people showed up, and they would have died if it wasn't for those really super smart Indians showing them how to grow corn. And in thanks, they had a big dinner, and everyone was happy, and they used cornucopias because that's the only instance in the universe where cornucopias are used. unless you believe in the Mandela effect, then I guess they're also in the Fruit of the Loom logo. But yeah, not so much. And in fact, if you start really drilling down and looking at the narrative that white people were even stealing the land in the first place, which is the excuse given for the Indian violence, you find out it's a little more complicated than that. It's not like white people just showed up and started pushing Indians out of their territory. In fact, I mean, you got to think of this. The people that were showing up were about as extreme Christian as you could get, the Puritans. They're about as extreme Protestant as you could possibly get. And they walked the walk. They walked the walk. And they did everything by the book, and they kept a lot of records. And while a revisionist can go back and take the testimony of aggrieved Indians and claim that some of these documents that the pilgrims and the settlers kept were, for example, when you have chiefs signing over property to the settlers, he didn't know what he was doing. Ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking the law, as they say. But anyway, let's just go down. Let's do a quick rundown of events. So starting in 1620, right? The pilgrims arrive on the Mayflower. They establish the Plymouth colony. And under the Plymouth Patent, November 3rd, 1620, King James granted them land rights of uninhabited areas between the 40th and 48th parallel, and asked them to plant a Christian commonwealth, and gave them a legal right to settle and subdue the wilderness, blessed by God and the crown. Now, there were some people that were in the area. There were Indians that lived there. Their leader was called Massasoit, I think that's how you pronounce it, of the Wampanoag Indians. And it was very shortly after their arrival that they met with the chief, Massasoit, Massasoit. I don't know if I'm probably not saying that right. It doesn't really matter. I'll say Massasoit. It looks like Massasoit to me. And they signed a peace treaty. And in this peace treaty, part of the binding articles of this peace treaty was Massasoit had to acknowledge and submit to King James as his sovereign. He was considered a leader of his people, but he was being welcomed into a hierarchy where he was no longer top dog. And he signed the documents acknowledging that he was content to submit to King James. At that point, pretty much anything the crown wants to do, and you can talk about whether it's moral or not or whatever. At that point, you submit to a king, you're bound to the wishes of the king. But again, they didn't stop there. They didn't just start seizing land. So in 1630, they expand the charter, and they start bringing in more settlers. And in 1639, they do the Taunton purchase. And so this was how a lot of these land acquisitions took place. If it was a part of the land that the Indians inhabited and where they were making use of, the settlers would buy it from them. They would purchase the land. They would trade them in, guns or food or beads or whatever whatever they had on hand that they could make the trade with. And the Indians agreed. The Indians agreed to sell land east of the Taunton River or Taunton River. It was a lawful purchase. They willingly signed it, and it extended the settlements to lands east of the Taunton River. They consented as subjects of the king, and it reinforced the rights of the settlers to that territory because they purchased it. Then you start to get to what some people refer to as some expansion without consent. And that's when the settlers decided to expand westward. Well, the thing was, and this is something that a lot of people that complain that we stole the land from the Indians can never make sense of. They can never have a rational argument about, because it's as simple as this. The settlers decided to expand west where there were no Indians living. It wasn't part of their lands that they were using, and so why would they have to ask permission to use it? It was no man's land. You might as well say that the chief of that local tribe in there could have said, well, that's my land, as easily as he could have.
The magic of Banff and Lake Louise. Sunlight sparkling off frozen lakes. The rush of winter excitement. Warm drinks. Fire crackling as snow falls softly. Banff and Lake Louise, where wonders await.
I said, and so is Canada, and California, and Mexico. Everywhere in this it's all my land. Well, why is it your land? You're not there. It's no one's land. Like, literally no one lives there. And so they start to expand westward. They form in 1643 the United Colonies. Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, Connecticut, New Haven formed the United Colonies. And this was the beginnings, I guess you could say, of the United States, the very early beginnings. And this was an alliance between the European colonies for protection, basically, and so that, and for trade, and just all the same reasons that the United States came together. And then in 1649, you had the Rehoboth. I don't know these names very well, so I'm going to mispronounce them a lot, I think. The Rehoboth Purchase. Again, if they were just stealing land, like they supposedly did in 1641, why are they buying it again in 1649? Well, it's because it was land that Massasoit and his tribe inhabited. And it was some land near the Pawtucket River, and they purchased this from the tribe because it was land that they were inhabiting and land that they were using. Once again, he signed the papers acknowledging that he was a subject of the king and that he agreed to the legal process of land ownership that was developing as the colony grew. And then in 1650, settlers began to extend their fences where they kept their cows into some land that, again, that the Indians weren't inhabiting. And you could say that to the degree Indians didn't agree to this at this point, especially having sworn allegiance to their new king, it's kind of like, what's the term they use these days? Eminent domain, where it's like, we've decided that this is a better, this field over here is better to used if we let cows graze there. And that was as simple as that. And that was another one of these complaints, though. Oh, the settlers never asked permission. Well, again, why are they buying it sometimes and not other times? It's because no one was fucking there. That's why. In 1653, Lancaster is established. Massachusetts Bay grants Lancaster to be a town that's founded in 1653. 1656 to 1657. That is when some of the trouble starts. Because Massasoit, the chief of the tribe that was inhabiting the land surrounding the Pilgrims, he dies. And when he dies, his sons, who weren't happy with the totally legit land purchases, decide that they want to take the land back. Remember, you might have heard the term Indian giver. They want it back. And the settlers are like, well, you can't have it back. We bought it. Like if we sell it, maybe someday you can buy it, but like it's ours now. This is why borders are important, by the way. This is why borders are important, because if you don't have a border, then yeah, guess what? People just come in. They just come in and show up and take it. Which is exactly what is happening in the United States, because we're a nation that does not enforce its borders. Hopefully some of that's changing, I don't know to what extent or for how long. So then one of the sons of Massasoit, Wamsuta, is summoned before the court because of some of these disputes and asked to sign a document swearing loyalty to the crown and to be subject to its laws and to agree that these purchases are valid. And historians, revisionists especially, will say, well, he was forced. He was forced to sign it. Okay, well, you don't really have any proof of that. The original document says he swore his oath reluctantly, and that's their proof that he was forced to do it, because he reluctantly did it. I don't know. I've reluctantly agreed to a lot of things. Doesn't mean I didn't agree to it. So then we have more cattle disputes. Again, at this point, this tribe of Indians has their representatives, their leadership has sworn an oath to the king. The king could just say, we're taking all of it without paying you for any of it. That's not what happened, but they could have done that. And you're the one that swore the oath to the king. So, sorry, that's what you did. The Wampanoag start driving cattle out of the lands where they're grazing and killing some of the livestock and just kind of causing trouble on the outskirts of the settlements. They are subject to the laws of the land at this point. They are subjects of the crown, and so they are tried and convicted in courts, and fines are levied against them. And this begins to piss off the Indians, the fact that they're having to follow the rules that they agreed to follow. By 1674, the United Colonies start hearing murmurs of war. One of the sons of Massasoit is going by the name King Philip. He decides to change his name to King Philip, and I guess to try to relate more to the white people. And they're doing a little planning to go to war. There he is. Pomatakan, a.k.a. King Philip. And this is learned by one of the Indians that has converted to Christianity and begun living amongst the white people. These are called praying Indians. You'll hear this referenced in an account we're going to listen to here in a moment. So when you hear that term, that's what it means, praying Indians. And he rats them out. He basically says, look, they're planning on going to war with you guys. His name is Sassamon. And when King Philip finds out that Sassamon ratted out their plans to the white settlers, they kill him. And because, once again, they're under the jurisdiction of the settlers at this point, the settlers try the 3 Indians involved in the murder and convict them and hang them. And this really is the last straw, because they're meant to follow the rules. Murder is no longer legal. Now that the white man has showed up, he's made these annoying rules about not murdering. And so they freak the fuck out. This is when they start outright active war against the settlers. So 1675, now remember, they showed up in 1620. It took 55 years. It took 55 years, less than a generation. In fact, that's what happened, was the initial generation that met the white man and made the agreement, that their leader died. The next generation was like, fuck you guys. And too late, the papers were already signed. And they started attacking the whites. The Wampanoag Indians looted Swansea on June 20th. They killed 7 settlers. And this was an unprovoked rebellion. The settlers weren't going around and hunting Indians. This was, if you want to say, this was the first shot fired in what would be later called King Philip's War. The war spreads from July to December 1675. The different neighboring tribes, the Nipmuc and the Narragansett, join King Philip. They raid Menden and Brookfield. And then there's the Great Swamp Fight that kills hundreds. It's all-out war at this point. By February 1676, they've attacked wagon trains. They're conducting raids on small towns. And one of those towns we have a first-hand account of. A woman by the name of Mary Rowlandson. Mary Rowlandson was a minister's wife, and her husband was away in the Massachusetts Bay. She was there with her children, and one night, the Indians snuck up upon her town, and this is her words as to what happened next.
On the 10th of February, 1675, came the Indians with great numbers upon Lancaster. Their first coming was about sunrising. Hearing the noise of some guns, we looked out. Several houses were burning, and the smoke ascended to heaven. There were 5 persons taken in one house, the father and the mother, and a sucking child. They knocked on the head. The other 2 they took and carried away alive.
By the way, in case it's not obvious, when she says knocked on the head, she means clubbed to death in the head. Not like 80s action movie Karate Chop knocked them out, because she says it a lot, because that's the preferred method of killing, is they beat you to death by clubbing, like literally bashing your skull in with a tomahawk or a club. So when you hear knocked in the head, that's what they're talking about.
They knocked on the head. The other 2 they took and carried away alive. There were 2 others who, being out of their garrison upon some occasion, were set upon. One was knocked on the head, the other escaped. Another there was who, running along, was shot and wounded, and fell down. He begged of them his life, promising them money, as they told me, but they would not hearken to him, but knocked him on the head, and stripped him naked, and split open his bowels. Another, seeing many of the Indians about his barn, ventured and went out, but was quickly shot down. There were 3 others belonging to the same garrison who were killed. The Indians getting up upon the roof of the barn had advantage to shoot down upon them over their fortification. Thus these murderous wretches went on, burning and destroying before them. At length they came and beset our own house, and quickly it was the dolefullest day that ever mine eyes saw. The house stood upon the edge of a hill. Some of the Indians got behind the hill, others into the barn, and others behind anything that could shelter them. From all which places they shot against the house, so that the bullets seemed to fly like hail, and quickly they wounded one man among us, then another, and then a third. About 2 hours, according to my observation, in that amazing time, they had been about the house before they prevailed to fire it, which they did with flax and hemp, which they brought out of the barn, and there being no defence about the house, only 2 flankers at 2 opposite corners, and one of them not finished.
So they have guns that they have acquired from the white people. Another reason why you shouldn't share your technology with less advanced peoples. One of the many reasons is that they'll use it against you. So they had rifles in addition to bows and arrows. They are shooting the houses and just indiscriminately. Eventually they kill the 3 men that are in the house with them. And then they decide, because they can't get the people to get out of the houses, they're just going to set all the houses on fire that the people are inside of.
They fired it once, and one ventured out and quenched it, but they quickly fired it again, and that took. Now is the dreadful hour come that I have often heard of, in time of war, as it was the case of others. But now mine eyes see it. Some in our house were fighting for their lives, others wallowing in their blood, the house on fire over our heads, and the bloody heathen ready to knock us on the head if we stirred out. Now might we hear the mothers and children crying out for themselves, and one another, Lord, what shall we do? Then I took my children, and one of my sisters, hers, to go forth and leave the house. But as soon as we came to the door and appeared, the Indians shot so thick that the bullets rattled against the house, as if one had taken a handful of stones and threw them, so that we were fain to give back. We had 6 stout dogs belonging to our garrison, but none of them would stir, though another time, if any Indian had come to the door, they were ready to fly upon him and tear him down. The Lord hereby would make us the more acknowledge his hand, and to see that our help is always in him. But out we must go, the fire increasing, and coming along behind us, roaring, and the Indians gaping before us, with their guns, spears, and hatchets, to devour us.
It's a typical immigrant story, right? These immigrants, that's usually what happens, right, to the immigrants coming across the southern border, is we trap them in burning houses and then shoot guns into the burning houses. Yeah, it's just the same. Your ancestors, it's the same. They were just immigrants like everybody else. So here they are, watching all their friends and family getting gunned down or clubbed to death, their skulls bashed in. The dirt is now mud because of all the blood gushing out of the corpses of your friends everywhere and family. The house is on fire, and every time you try to leave, a hail of bullets come at you. And it gets to a point where, well, I mean, I don't want to burn alive, and so we got to get out of the house. And so they leave the house.
No sooner were we out of the house, but my brother-in-law, being before wounded in defending the house, in or near the throat, fell down dead, whereat the Indians scornfully shouted, and hallowed, and were presently upon him, stripping off his clothes, the bullets flying thick. One went through my side, and the same, as would seem, through the bowels and hand of my dear child in my arms. One of my elder sister's children, named William, had then his leg broken, which the Indians perceiving, they knocked him on his head. Thus were we butchered by those merciless heathen, standing amazed, with the blood running down to our heels. My eldest sister being yet in the house, and seeing those woeful sights, the infidels hauling mothers one way, and children another, and some wallowing in their blood, and her elder son telling her that her son William was dead, and myself was wounded, she said, "And Lord, let me die with them," which was no sooner said, but she was struck with a bullet, and fell down dead over the threshold. I hope she is reaping the fruit of her good labours, being faithful to the service of God in her place. The Indians laid hold of us, pulling me one way, and the children another.
So after slaughtering much of her friends and family in front of her, they shoot her. It goes through her side, and then the bullet enters into the child, her 6-year-old daughter that she's carrying, goes through the bowels and hand of her 6-year-old child. So she's bleeding and wounded, carrying a mortally wounded 6-year-old girl, and then the Indians proceed to tear the children away from whoever's still alive and taking them off in one direction, and taking the adults another direction. She's allowed to keep her child, though, who's bleeding out. But that's just like the kids in cages, right, at the border. Remember the kids in cages? It's the same thing, right? We're the same. It's the same thing.
There were 12 killed, some shot, some stabbed with their spears, some knocked down with their hatchets. When we are in prosperity, oh, the little that we think of such dreadful sights, and to see our dear friends and relations lie bleeding out their heart blood upon the ground. There was one who was chopped into the head with a hatchet and stripped naked, and yet was crawling up and down. It is a solemn sight to see so many Christians lying in their blood, some here and some there, like a company of sheep torn by wolves, all of them stripped naked by a company of hellhounds, roaring, singing, ranting, and insulting, as if they would have torn our very hearts out. Yet the Lord, by his almighty power, preserved a number of us from death, for there were 24 of us taken alive and carried captive.
So they pretty much butcher the entire town. There's about 20 still alive that they're taking away. She describes a scene where a man has been hatcheted in the head and stripped naked, and his pathetic body is crawling around aimlessly on the ground in his last moments. And the Indians are celebrating. They're celebrating their savagery, whooping and hollering, high-fiving each other. This is the noble savage. This is the noble Indians. They came and they told us how to make corn. They told us how to make corn. Now, Mary Rowlandson was a first generation American, or not even. She was actually from England. She was born in Somersetshire, England, in 1637, and she was one of these immigrants, right? The immigrants that are just like the Mexicans coming across the border so they can get welfare. It's the exact same thing. It's the same fucking thing, right? Right? It's the same thing as these H-1B visa Indians. It's the same thing, right? Everyone, you were an immigrant once too. It's the same exact scenario. You know, coming here with almost no money, chopping trees down, and building a house and building a farm out of fucking literally nothing. No government loans, no grants from NGOs. Yeah, I mean, that's almost a miracle you survived the boat ride, get here in the first place. And not all your children do survive on a regular basis. They're dropping dead left and right. The winters are hellish, and we're talking about New England here before central heating existed. And they're living in log cabins, and you're having to chop all that firewood just to fucking stay alive. And then all the Indians who taught you how to grow corn, all of a sudden don't like the deals that they already made, and don't like following laws like, I don't know, murder being illegal and the death penalty for murder. So they freak out and just start killing you in a jealous rage, murdering people left, right, and it's not a military target. They're not attacking a fort. This is just people like farmers. This is just farmers scraping by. Mary Rowlandson wasn't like, upper class, elite class, to the extent that she, was, because she was married to a minister. I mean, doesn't mean that she didn't have to, she didn't have a whole lot of money, and you'll find out how little they had here in a moment. Well, now she has nothing because they burned literally everything that her family owned to the ground. And now she's carrying her 6-year-old daughter, who is bleeding out in her arms. She's been shot. She doesn't know where her other children are. She doesn't know where many of her, at least not the ones that she didn't see murdered. She doesn't see the rest of her family or friends. And the Indians start to take her into the wilderness for who knows why.
One of the Indians carried my poor wounded babe upon a horse. It went moaning all along, "I shall die, I shall die." I went on foot after it, with sorrow that cannot be expressed. At length, I took it off the horse and carried it in my arms till my strength failed, and I fell down with it. Then they set me upon a horse with my wounded child in my lap, and there being no furniture upon the horse's back, as we were going down a steep hill, we both fell over the horse's head, at which they, like inhumane creatures, laughed and rejoiced to see it. After this, it quickly began to snow, and when night came on, they stopped. Now down I must sit in the snow, by a little fire, and a few boughs behind me, with my sick child in my lap, calling much for water, being now, through the wound, fallen into a violent fever. My own wound also growing so stiff that I could scarce sit down or rise up. Yet so it must be that I must sit all this cold winter night upon the cold, snowy ground, with my sick child in my arms, looking that every hour would be the last of its life, and having no Christian friend near me, either to comfort or help me. Oh, I may see the wonderful power of God, that my spirit did not utterly sink under my affliction.
And so she is forced the first night. Now, this is a story that is not totally dissimilar from the Olive Oatman story in that after the Indians take their captives, they march them on a grueling death march. It's kind of funny because you always hear about the Trail of Tears all the time. Oh, the Trail of Tears. You made Indians walk somewhere. Well, we learned it from watching you. We learned it from watching you. Basically, the Indians, after taking captives, would often march their captives, wounded, some of them severely, like in this case, through insane wilderness with whatever they had on, not feeding them because all the food was going to the Indians, and many of them would drop dead or starve or whatever. And this is a similar kind of a situation where they're trying to, they know that there will be a response to what they just did, and every time they would attack a village or do a raid, they would pack up and move, because that's the other thing. These Indians were, to some extent, nomadic. To the degree that they had villages, they would raise them, burn them to the ground, and pack up everything they had, which wasn't much, and they would up and move to another area, and where they would, again, erect really shitty huts and stuff, that were basically temporary until they decided to move again. And that's the life that they led. So they were adapted to this way of eluding the English that would come to respond to their attacks, because they could just change locations instantly. In fact, she remarks that she's surprised at one of the places they stop that it's so close to English encampments, and yet the English have no idea that they're even there, even though it's like 25 miles away.
Now away we must go with those barbarous creatures, with our bodies wounded and bleeding, and our hearts no less than our bodies. About a mile we went that night, up upon a hill within sight of the town, where they intended to lodge. There was hard by a vacant house, deserted by the English before, for fear of the Indians. I asked them whether I might not lodge in the house that night, to which they answered, "What, will you love Englishmen still?" This was the dolefullest night that ever my eyes saw. Oh, the roaring, and singing, and dancing, and yelling of those black creatures in the night, which made the place a lively resemblance of hell. And as miserable was the waste that was there made of horses, cattle, sheep, swine, calves, lambs, roasting pigs, and fowl, which...
So what she's talking about there is they just slaughtered any and all the animals that the settlers had, and just gorged on the meat. They didn't try to take any of the animals to, because they didn't know anything about animal husbandry, these Indians. They weren't advanced enough even for that. So they just squandered all the resources immediately and ate whatever they wanted, and then gave nothing to their captives,
which they had plundered, in the town, some roasting, some lying and burning, and some boiling to feed our merciless enemies, who were joyful enough, though we were disconsolate. To add to the dolefulness of the former day, and the dismalness of the present night, my thoughts ran upon my losses and sad, bereaved condition. All was gone, my husband gone, at least separated from me, he being in the bay. And to add to my grief, the Indians told me they would kill him as he came homeward. My children gone, my relations and friends gone, our house and home and all our comforts, within door and without, all was gone, except my life. And I knew not but the next moment that might go too. There remained nothing to me but one poor wounded babe, and it seemed at present worse than death that it was in such a pitiful condition, bespeaking compassion, and I had no refreshing for it, nor suitable things to revive it. Little do many think what is the savageness and brutishness of this barbarous enemy, aye, even those that seem to profess more than others among them, when the English have fallen into their hands. Those 7 that were killed at Lancaster the summer before, upon a Sabbath day, and the one that was afterward killed upon a weekday, were slain and mangled in a barbarous manner.
So she talks about how the Indians had been attacking and mutilating the people that they killed, and she didn't know if she was going to live moment to moment. It was, you never know what these people are going to do, if you can even call them people. They were unpredictable. They were bloodthirsty. They were celebrating their brutal murders. And she had nothing now. She had nothing except for her child, who she feared would die at any moment. They're not feeding them. They're making them sleep outside in the snow. And, there's obviously a fear of violence and rape and everything else.
I sat much alone with a poor wounded child in my lap, which moaned night and day, having nothing to revive the body or cheer the spirits of her. But instead of that, sometimes one Indian would come and tell me 1 hour that, "Your master will knock your child in the head," and then a second, and then a third, "Your master will quickly knock your child in the head." this was the comfort I had from them. Thus 9 days I sat upon my knees, with my babe in my lap, till my flesh was raw again. My child being even ready to depart this sorrowful world, they bade me carry it out to another wigwam, I suppose because they would not be troubled with such spectacles, whither I went with a very heavy heart, and down I sat, with the picture of death in my lap. About 2 hours in the night, my sweet babe like a lamb departed this life on February 18, 1675, it being about 6 years and 5 months old. It was 9 days from the first wounding, in this miserable condition, without any refreshing of one nature or other, except a little cold water. I cannot but take notice how, at another time, I could not bear to be in the room where any dead person was, but now the case is changed. I must and could lie down by my dead babe, side by side, all the night after. I have thought, since of the wonderful goodness of God to me in preserving me in the use of my reason and senses in that distressed time, that I did not use wicked and violent means to end my own miserable life. In the morning, when they understood that my child was dead, they sent for me home to my master's wigwam. By my master in this writing must be understood Quinapin, who was a sagamore.
By the way, at this point, she's referring to her master because she's officially a slave. That's right. The Native Americans practiced slavery. I thought that was all white people. Oh, no, the evil white man came and kicked out the peaceful Native Americans and then brought in slaves because the whites are the slave. No, the Indians all practiced slavery. Literally the whole planet did. And these were officially slaves. There were no bones about it. They weren't captives. They were slaves. They were sold to other Indians, traded for other Indians. She already had a master. She was property, 100%. And for 9 days, they have a 6-year-old girl who's dying from a gunshot wound to the hand and gut. And all they give her for 9 days is a little bit of cold water until she eventually dies. And she dies alone, or, with her mother in a wigwam away from the rest of the Indians because they don't want to have to listen to her crying about dying. And that's just like the kids in cages, right? It's just like the kids in cages at the border. We have so much in common, right? With these immigrants. So her master summons her after her child dies and she refuses to leave the body.
And married King Philip's wife's sister. Not that he first took me, but I was sold to him by another Narragansett Indian, who took me when first I came out of the garrison. I went to take up my dead child in my arms to carry it with me, but they bid me let it alone. There was no resisting, but go I must and leave it. When I had been at my master's wigwam, I took the first opportunity I could get to go look after my dead child. When I came, I asked them what they had done with it. Then they told me it was upon the hill. Then they went and showed me where it was, where I saw the ground was newly digged, and there they told me they had buried it. There I left that child in the wilderness, and must commit it, and myself also in this wilderness condition, to him who is above all.
So her baby gets buried when they call her away to talk to her master, and when she's gone, they get her baby and bury it on a hill somewhere. And now she doesn't know where her other children are, if they're still alive. Her husband, she doesn't even know does he know yet, or he probably knows. I mean, I would imagine that news of something like that would travel fast. Are they coming after me? They got to try to say, where are the English right now? Where are we going?
God having taken away this dear child, I went to see my daughter Mary, who was at this same Indian town, at a wigwam not very far off, though we had little liberty or opportunity to see one another. She was about 10 years old, and taken from the door at first by a praying Indian, and afterwards sold for a gun. When I came in sight, she would fall a-weeping, at which they were provoked, and would not let me come near her, but bade me be gone, which was a heart-cutting word to me. I had one child dead, another in the wilderness, I knew not where. The third they would not let me come near to. I could not sit still in this condition, but kept walking from one place to another. And as I was going along, my heart was even overwhelmed with the thoughts of my condition, and that I should have children, and a nation which I knew not, ruled over them. Whereupon I earnestly entreated the Lord that he would consider my low estate, and show me a token for good, and if it were his blessed will, some sign and hope of some relief.
So she finds out one of her kids is alive, her 9-year-old daughter, who has been sold for a rifle to some Indian who I'm sure is not just raping her all the time. and they won't let her talk to her, and she just breaks down crying when she sees her. She then finds out that her son is also alive.
My son came to me and asked me how I did. I had not seen him before, since the destruction of the town, and I knew not where he was, till I was informed by himself that he was amongst a smaller parcel of Indians, whose place was about 6 miles off.
Also, to give you a bit of the timeline, she was in captivity for multiple months. And the way she separates the timeline in her book, it's not based on weeks or days or whatever. It's based on departures. That's how she would tell or would break up her story. It was based on how often the Indians would pack up and move to another location. So it's difficult to know how long she was at each location. There are maps that show kind of like the path that she took. I think it's like hundreds of miles. It's like I said, it's during the winter. They cross icy rivers and shit like that. Go through snow. It's not easy going. So I'm not sure exactly, but there are other Indian encampments who also have slaves, white slaves, and she finds out her son is a slave at another camp.
With tears in his eyes, he asked me whether his sister Sarah was dead, and told me he had seen his sister Mary, and prayed me that I would not be troubled in reference to himself. The occasion of his coming to see me at this time was this. There was, as I said, about 6 miles from us, a small plantation of Indians, where it seems he had been during his captivity.
Oh, Indians with a plantation with slaves on it. That's weird. Maybe we should get reparations from the Indians. What do you think?
The Indians returned from Medfield. All the company, for those that belonged to the other small company, came through the town that now we were at. But before they came to us, oh, the outrageous roaring and hooping that there was. They began their din about a mile before they came to us. By their noise and hooping, they signified how many they had destroyed, which was at that time 23. Those that were with us at home were gathered together as soon as they heard the hooping, and every time that the other went over their number, these at home gave a shout, that the very earth rung again. And thus they continued till those that had been upon the expedition were come up to the Sagamore's wigwam, and then, oh, the hideous insulting and triumphing that there was over some Englishmen's scalps that they had taken, as their manner is.
So imagine that you're sold into slavery, into Indian slavery, after your slavers murdered your family, made you watch as your 6-year-old daughter died slowly in your arms of a gunshot wound and of starvation and dehydration and exposure. You are slowly healing from your wound that's, I'm sure, not getting medical attention. You find out your 9-year-old daughter is likely getting raped a couple, basically down the street from you. Your son is working as a slave in a plantation 6 miles away. And occasionally, raiding parties come back from murdering more of your people, carrying the scalps, like body parts, of the white people they murdered, dancing around and celebrating. Yeah, that sounds exactly like what the Indian immigrants have to go through, right? Isn't that exactly what Mr. Pajit and Pajita have to go through? They're just like us. They're exactly like us. They had the same kind of dangers they had to face, the same kinds of, I bet, the racism. The racism they have to, when a white girl doesn't want to go on a date with them, it's just as devastating. Right? It's exactly the fucking same. So then she runs into a woman from her town who is struggling with this situation for obvious reasons. She was taken when she was very pregnant, and she's due to give birth. And she doesn't want to give birth in the forest with a bunch of fucking rapey Indians. And she also has a small child. And so she's trying to care for a small child while being very pregnant, and she's begging the Indians, hey, look, I'm about to have a baby here. Can you at least let me go back to the white people?
Now the Indians began to talk of removing from this place, some one way and some another. There were now, besides myself, 9 English captives in this place, all of them children except one woman. I got an opportunity to go and take my leave of them. They being to go one way and I another, I asked them whether they were earnest with God for deliverance. They told me they did as they were able, and it was some comfort to me that the Lord stirred up children to look to him. The woman, Visria, Goodwife Jocelyn, told me she should never see me again, and that she could find in her heart to run away. I wished her not to run away by any means, for we were near 30 miles from any English town, and she very big with child, and had but 1 week to reckon, and another child in her arms, 2 years old, and bad rivers there were to go over, and we were feeble, with our poor and coarse entertainment. She having much grief upon her spirit about her miserable condition, being so near her time, she would be often asking the Indians to let her go home, they not being willing to that, and yet vexed with her importunity, gathered a great company together about her, and stripped her naked, and set her in the midst of them. And when they had sung and danced about her, in their hellish manner, as long as they pleased, they knocked her on the head, and the child in her arms with her. When they had done that, they made a fire and put them both into it, and told the other children that were with them that if they attempted to go home, they would serve them in like manner. The children said she did not shed 1 tear, but prayed all the while.
So that's just like the immigrants today, right? She asked because she's about to give birth to please be released, even though she's probably being, at this point she's probably brain broken, has no idea. I mean, they're 30 miles away from the closest English town. She wouldn't be able to get there anyway. She's losing her mind. She starts pleading with them and tries to leave, and they surround her, rip her clothes off, dance around, make fun of her, maybe some other things that this Puritan woman decided not to include in her writing, and then bash her skull in with a hatchet, and bash her kid, 2-year-old kid, in the head with a hatchet, and then throw their bodies in the fire. So that's what you're dealing with. That's what you're dealing with these peaceful Indians that, you should feel super bad about taking their land.
We travelled about half a day or little more, and came to a desolate place in the wilderness, where there were no wigwams or inhabitants before. We came about the middle of the afternoon to this place, cold and wet, and snowy, and hungry, and weary, and no refreshing for man, but the cold ground to sit on, and our poor Indian cheer. Heart-aching thoughts here I had about my poor children, who were scattered up and down among the wild beasts of the forest. My head was light and dizzy, either through hunger or hard lodging, or trouble, or altogether. My knees feeble, my body raw by sitting double, night and day.
Then she starts to suffer from the effects of starvation, because even though she is now, she's a slave in their civilization, and they are, they've got plenty to eat. It's for them, it's business as usual. This is just how they live. They're hunter-gatherers, and they're not feeding her, and they're not feeding the kids often. And it makes. Let me just put it this way: it makes picking cotton sound like fucking Disney World.
On the Saturday, they boiled an old horse's leg which they had got, and so we drank of the broth as soon as they thought it was ready, and when it was almost all gone, they filled it up again. The first week of my being among them, I hardly ate anything. The second week, I found my stomach grow very faint for want of something, and yet it was very hard to get down their filthy trash. But the third week, though, I could think how formerly my stomach would turn against this or that, and I could starve and die before I could eat such things. Yet they were sweet and savoury to my taste. I was at this time knitting a pair of white cotton stockings for my mistress, and had not yet wrought upon a Sabbath day. When the Sabbath came, they bade me go to work. I told them it was the Sabbath day, and desired them to let me rest, and told them I would do as much more tomorrow, to which they answered me they would break my face.
Well, I don't know what else she was expecting. Yes, they're feeding them boiled horse leg broth. Here you go, slaves, boiled horse leg broth. But for her, she's so far into starvation that actually tasted really good. That was the most savory thing she was going to have.
We came that day to a great swamp, by the side of which we took up our lodging that night. When I came to the brow of the hill that looked toward the swamp, I thought we had been come to a great Indian town, though there were none but our own company. The Indians were as thick as the trees. It seemed as if there had been 1,000 hatchets going at once. If one looked before one, there was nothing but Indians, and behind one, nothing but Indians, and so on either hand, I myself in the midst, and no Christian soul near me. And yet how hath the Lord preserved me in safety? Oh, the experience that I have had of the goodness of God, to me and mine.
I find it striking that Now, this is all retrospective, right? She wrote this after it was over. But the amount of time she's thanking God, like I cut out a bunch of, because she's constantly, well, she's a Puritan, and a minister's wife, and she's constantly thanking God for like all this horrible shit that's happening to her. But also, look, I mean, it's a different meaning now, but you could be saying this in Canada and coming to a neighborhood near you.
Though there were none but our own company. The Indians were as thick as the trees. It seemed as if there had been 1,000 hatchets going at once. If one looked before one, there was nothing but Indians, and behind one, nothing but Indians, and so on.
Welcome to Canada and America pretty soon. Different kind of Indian, but, you know.
After a restless and hungry night there, we had a wearisome time of it the next day. The swamp by which we lay was, as it were, a deep dungeon, and an exceeding high and steep hill before it. Before I got to the top of the hill, I thought my heart and legs and all would have broken and failed me. What, through faintness and soreness of body, it was a grievous day of travel to me. As we went along, I saw a place where English cattle had been. That was comfort to me, such as it was.
That's how fucked up her situation was. Just seeing anything that reminded her of white people. The fact that she saw a field where she knew that cattle had been because of the manure and the footprints and maybe the remnants of a fence. It was just a reminder that she wasn't in some alternate universe where there weren't white people anymore. That there was some remnant of her civilization still there. And increasingly, I think that white people are going to relate to that, as we are only able to be reminded by some remnant of our people.
Quickly after that, we came to an English path, which so took with me that I thought I could have freely lain down and died. That day, a little after noon, we came to Squakeag, where the Indians quickly spread themselves over the deserted English fields, gleaning what they could find. Some picked up ears of wheat that were crickled down. Some found ears of Indian corn. Some found groundnuts, and others sheaves of wheat that were frozen together in the shock and went to threshing of them out. Myself got 2 ears of Indian corn, and whilst I did but turn my back, one of them was stolen from me, which much troubled me. There came an Indian to them at that time with a basket of horse liver. I asked him to give me a piece. "What?" says he. "Can you eat horse liver?" I told him I would try if he would give a piece, which he did, and I laid it on the coals to roast. But before it was half ready, they got half of it away from me, so that I was fain to take the rest and eat it as it was, with the blood about my mouth, and yet a savoury bit it was to me.
So she has an ear of corn. Indian corn is really small, by the way. Once again, the Indians are pilfering over the remnants of a abandoned English farm, taking whatever's wildly growing in the field, and she tries eating some horse liver, and before it can be fully cooked, they make her eat it when it's halfway cooked, and she's gobbling it down because it's calories. It's starvation mode. Literally anything tastes good at that point.
I had not seen my son a pretty while, and here was an Indian of whom I made inquiry after him, and asked him when he saw him. He answered me that such a time his master roasted him, and that himself did eat a piece of him, as big as his 2 fingers, and that he was very good meat.
So the Indians are cruel. She asks, "Have you seen my son?" And the Indian says, "Oh yeah, I ate him. His master cooked him up, and I ate a big piece, and he was good."
But the Lord upheld my spirit under this discouragement, and I considered their horrible addictedness to lying, and that there is not one of them that makes the least conscience of speaking of truth. In this place, on a cold night, as I lay by the fire, I removed a stick that kept the heat from me. A squaw moved it down again, at which I looked up, and she threw a handful of ashes in mine eyes. I thought I should have been quite blinded and have never seen more, but lying down, the water ran out of my eyes and carried the dirt with it, that by the morning I recovered my sight again. I cannot but remember how many times sitting in their wigwams and musing on things past, I should suddenly leap up and run out, as if I had been at home, forgetting where I was and what my condition was. But when I was without, and saw nothing but wilderness, and woods, and a company of barbarous heathens, mind quickly returned to me. About this time, I began to think that all my hopes of restoration would come to nothing. I thought of the English army and hoped for their coming and being taken by them, but that failed. I hoped to be carried to Albany, as the Indians had discoursed before, but that failed also.
So one of the sad realities of this is, despite the fact that had the military been strong, presence been strong in the colonies, Obviously, the English military could have wiped out all those Indians, but they just didn't have the manpower. They were at war with these tribes, and they were trying to protect the towns that were already there, being attacked, and they couldn't spare soldiers to go pursue them deep into Indian country to rescue people that they weren't even sure would still be alive. So she was largely abandoned because there weren't the resources to do anything about it. And that's another thing that people, they always try to exaggerate the military might of the white man coming here and just slaughtering Indians left, right, and sideways. It's like, no, they really didn't have the power to do that, especially not in the early days. In the early days, it was all they could do to keep supplying the colonies so the colonies could stay alive. They didn't have the military presence to deal with something like this.
They came yelping from Hatley, where they had killed 3 Englishmen and brought one captive with them, Visepdown Thomas Reed. They all gathered about the poor man, asking him many questions. I desired also to go and see him, and when I came, he was crying bitterly, supposing they would quickly kill him. Whereupon I asked one of them whether they intended to kill him. He answered me they would not. He being a little cheered with that, I asked him about the welfare of my husband. He told me he saw him such a time in the bay, and he was well, but very melancholy. By which I certainly understood, though I suspected it before, that whatsoever the Indians told me respecting him was vanity and lies. Some of them told me he was dead, and they had killed him. Some said he was married again, and that the governor wished him to marry, and told him he should have his choice, and that all persuaded I was dead. So like were these barbarous creatures to him who was a liar from the beginning.
So she often comments about how the Indians lie uncontrollably, cruelly, and have no sense of morality when it comes to telling the truth, or really a great number of things, as it would seem. And that also reflects on why you might see Indians whining about agreements that they have signed. They say, well, Indians didn't have any conception of ownership. Well, I don't think they had any conception of a lot of things, including telling the truth or honor.
I went to see an English youth in this place, one John Gilbert of Springfield. I found him lying without doors, upon the ground. I asked him how he did. He told me he was very sick of a flux with eating so much blood. They had turned him out of the wigwam, and with him an Indian papoose, almost dead, whose parents had been killed, in a bitter cold day, without fire or clothes. The young man himself had nothing on but his shirt and waistcoat. This sight was enough to melt a heart of flint.
Now imagine that. Their cruelty extends to even their own people. They have a baby that the parents have died, and so there's no one to take care of the baby. And rather than the tribe saying, well, I guess we'll take care of the baby because the parents died, no, they put the baby outside. They just plop the baby outside in the cold with no food, no water, no shelter, next to their starving to death slave kid who's about 9 years old. So outside in their front yard, they've got a white kid who's suffering from some illness because apparently they're feeding him blood. That's the only food they're going to give him. And he's laying on the ground dying. And next to him is a dying baby. That's an Indian baby that they just don't give a fuck about. And that's how much they value human life.
There they lay quivering in the cold, the youth round like a dog, the papoose stretched out with his eyes and nose and mouth full of dirt, and yet alive, and groaning. I advised John to go and get to some fire. He told me he could not stand, but I persuaded him still lest he should lie there and die. And with much ado, I got him to a fire and went myself home. As soon as I was got home, his master's daughter came after me to know what I had done with the Englishman. I told her I had got him to a fire in such a place. For her satisfaction, I went along with her and brought her to him, but before I got home again, it was noised about that I was running away and getting the English youth along with me, that as soon as I came in, they began to rant and domineer, asking me where I had been and what I had been doing, and saying they would knock him on the head. I told them I had been seeing the English youth, and that I would not run away. They told me I lied, and taking up a hatchet, they came to me and said they would knock me down if I stirred out again, and so confined me to the wigwam. If I keep in, I must die with hunger, and if I go out, I must be knocked in the head.
Because they don't feed her. It's up to her to go and try to find things that she can eat, discarded food or boiled horse leg broth, that sort of a thing. And because she can't leave the wigwam, or they'll put a hatchet in her skull, she has to stay in and just starve. And so I don't know. That sounds just like it's just like those those hotels in New York where we're putting all the immigrants, right? Same exact thing. They're just like us. You know, these immigrants in the 5-star hotels, it's horrible living conditions. When they turned down the food, you guys remember that news story when the immigrants were saying, oh, this food, this free food, this prepackaged free food, it's not good, so we're throwing it away, and then we're going to protest because the food's not good enough. But we're the same. We're just like them. They're just like us.
Then my son came to see me, and I asked his master to let him stay a while with me, that I might comb his head and look over him, for he was almost overcome with lice. He told me, when I had done, that he was very hungry, but I had nothing to relieve him, but bid him go into the wigwams as he went along and see if he could get anything among them. Which he did, and it seems tarried a little too long, for his master was angry with him and beat him, and then sold him.
So her son finds her. He's starving to death. He's riddled with lice. She tells him to go try to find some food in some of the wigwams. He finds it, and his master comes and gets pissed off and beats the shit out of him, and then sells him to someone else. She later talks about how she didn't see him again until she was eventually released. But for the whole rest of the time that she was in captivity, she wasn't sure if he was alive or dead. Same thing with her daughter. I'm pretty sure she doesn't see her daughter for the rest of the time.
We began this remove with wading over Bangkwang River. The water was up to the knees, and the stream very swift, and so cold that I thought it would have cut me in sunder. I was so weak and feeble that I reeled as I went along, and thought, there I must end my days at last, after my bearing and getting through so many difficulties. The Indian stood laughing to see me staggering along. Then I sat down to put on my stockings and shoes, with the tears running down my eyes, and sorrowful thoughts in my heart. But I got up to go along with them. Quickly there came up to us an Indian, who informed them that I must go to Wachusett to my master, for there was a letter come from the council to the Sagamores about redeeming the captives, and that there would be another in 14 days, and that I must be there ready. My heart was so heavy before that I could scarce speak or go in the path, and yet now so light that I could run. My strength seemed to come again, and recruit my feeble knees and aching heart. Yet it pleased them to go but 1 mile that night, and there we stayed 2 days. In that time came a company of Indians to us, near 30, all on horseback. My heart skipped within me, thinking they had been Englishmen at the first sight of them, for they were dressed in English apparel, with hats, white neckcloths, and sashes about their waists, and ribbons upon their shoulders. But when they came near, there was a vast difference between the lovely faces of Christians and foul looks of those heathens, which much damped my spirit again.
So she is told they're going to do a slave release negotiation in one of these other towns where I think King Philip, the Indian King Philip, is located. He's negotiating prices for release, hostage negotiation, I guess. And but they're dragging their ass after driving her through the forest. They know that she wants to go there, so they're purposely just stopping every 1 mile and for a couple of days. And then she sees Indians wearing likely the clothing of the Englishmen they had murdered. And she's excited, thinking, oh, that finally I'm rescued. Then they show up, and they're not the white people that she was hoping to see.
We took up our packs, and along we went. The wearisome day I had of it. As we went along, I saw an Englishman stripped naked and lying dead upon the ground, but knew not who it was. Then we came to another Indian town, where we stayed all night. In this town, there were 4 English children, captives, and one of them my own sisters. I went to see how she did, and she was well considering her captive condition. I would have tarried that night with her, but they that owned her would not suffer it. Then I went into another wigwam, where they were boiling corn and beans, which was a lovely sight to see, but I could not get a taste thereof. Then I went to another wigwam, where there were 2 of the English children. The squaw was boiling horses' feet. Then she cut me off a little piece and gave one of the English children a piece also. Then I went home to my mistress's wigwam, and they told me I disgraced my master with begging, and if I did so any more, they would knock me in the head. I told them they had as good knock me in the head as starve me to death.
So more of the same, starving, threats of murder every day. Just like the immigrants of today, right?
Then came Tom and Peter with a second letter from the council about the captives. Though they were Indians, I got them by the hand and burst out into tears.
These are the praying Indians that she discusses. So they're basically race traitor Indians, I guess you could say. They're Indians that have converted to Christianity and live among white people and act as liaisons, I guess you could say, with the Indians, because they can speak the languages and they know all the customs and everything else. And so these two emissaries show up to negotiate her release, and so that's what this is about here.
My heart was so full that I could not speak to them, but recovering myself, I asked them how my husband did, and all my friends and acquaintance. They said, "They are all very well but melancholy." They brought me 2 biscuits and a pound of tobacco. The tobacco I quickly gave away. When it was all gone, one asked me to give him a pipe of tobacco. I told him it was all gone. Then began he to rant and threaten. I told him when my husband came, I would give him some. "Hang him, rogue," says he. "I will knock out his brains if he comes here." And then again, in the same breath, they would say that if there should come 100 without guns, they would do them no hurt. So unstable, and like madmen they were. So that, fearing the worst, I durst not send to my husband, though there were some thoughts of his coming to redeem and fetch me, not knowing what might follow, for there was little more trust to them than to the master they served. When the letter was come, the Sagamores met to consult about the captives, and called me to them to inquire how much my husband would give to redeem me. When I came, I sat down among them, as I was wont to do, as their manner is. Then they bade me stand up, and said they were the general court. They bid me speak what I thought he would give. Now knowing that all we had was destroyed by the Indians, I was in a great strait. I thought if I should speak of but a little, it would be slighted, and hinder the matter. If of a great sum, I knew not where it would be procured. Yet at a venture I said, £20, yet desired them to take less. But they would not hear of that, but sent that message to Boston, that for £20 I should be redeemed. It was a praying Indian that wrote their letter for them.
Because they were illiterate. They couldn't read and write. In their own language either, because they never invented a written language. So eventually they get her release, and she is purchased for £20, which a local women's relief fund, I think, in Boston raises because her husband didn't have any money because his entire everything was burned to the ground by the Indians. And so she is released, and that is 11 weeks. 11 weeks of captivity among literally the same exact Indians that you're told saved us. And that's why we have Thanksgiving, because they taught us how to grow corn. Just 50 years later. 50 years later, after the first Thanksgiving, where the Pilgrims were saved by the Indians, just 50 years later, they became jealous of the success of the white people. They became angry. They regretted the deals they had made with the white people. And they resorted to violence to try to take it. They never wanted to learn from us. Very, very few of them became the so-called praying Indians. And that was the first of many stories just like that. In fact, revisionists now, historians now, when you go and look up Mary Rowlandson, they act as if these kinds of stories are some kind of fetish for white people. They say that, oh, yeah, it's a captivity narrative, almost like it's a genre of porn. In fact, while looking for this, for information on this, I found a YouTube video of literally a Jew who said exactly that these were the kinds of stories that Puritans loved. Blood-soaked, violent stories of helpless white women being captured by savages and raped. That was just something that Puritans were into. And that's why so many of these accounts exist, which, by the way, these aren't works of fiction. This is all historical fact. Mary Rowlandson and her family were real. These events really happened. Olive Oatman was real. Those events really happened. These are first-hand accounts. These were all her words. Her words that I got from her book. And then I, fed into an AI to voice. But they act as if this is some kind of weird fetish that Puritans had. And they try to explain it away by saying, well, the Indians, they were fucked over by the reason why they started attacking them is they were fucked over by the Puritans that were expanding beyond what they ever thought would happen. Well, again, all that expansion was legally done. Much of it signed off by their leadership. Much of the expansion paid for. Again, if they were just seizing land left and right, why would they occasionally pay for it? It doesn't make any sense. Their chief made his tribe beholden to the crown willingly. And similar stories all throughout New England. This is just one of the, this was the first. You know, you go to our Wikipedia here, and again, they say, the name of her book was called The Sovereignty and Goodness of God, being a narrative of the captivity and restoration of Mrs. Mary Rowlandson. And they call it a literary genre, captivity narratives now. Captivity narratives. It's just a genre of literature. Like the Olive Oatman story. Like so many others. I mean, captivity narratives in and of itself has like a whole entry on Wikipedia. I mean, they admit that they're true, but they act as if all of our ancestors were just big fat liars that exaggerated all the brutality. I don't know how you could exaggerate that. Her daughter really was killed. Her daughter really did die. She really was sold into slavery. Her family really was gunned down. Her friends really slaughtered and chopped in the head with hatchets, scalped. I don't know how much exaggeration you need when like that's what's going on. And if anything, you read the whole book, which I did. She's not even that pissed off sounding. Like if anything, it's annoying that she's not. It's annoying that she's constantly thanking God for like her good luck. And I'm like, this is like the worst luck. What are you talking about? You know, this is, you should be really fucking pissed off. And yet that's what they want you to think about your ancestors. Because that's what fits the narrative. That's what happens when you let people take over academia that hate you. People that want to undermine your power in your own nation by saying it doesn't belong to you because you took it from someone that deserves it more. Now, I mentioned earlier that Matt Walsh did a little soliloquy about this sort of a thing and how white people shouldn't be embarrassed about what they have done with their conquered land. In fact, they should be proud of it. How he specifically mentioned that the Native Americans, while they like to say they've been here for 20,000 years, which, you know, debatable, they didn't do anything with that at that time. They literally did not progress. For 20,000 years, it's almost indistinguishable, the people that were like the way of life of the people from 20,000 years to the arrival of white people. It's like nothing happened. It's like nothing changed in those 20,000 years. And in fact, there was so much warring going on, so much fighting between the tribes, that there's no way to even know which tribes were where for how long. I think I mentioned the Olive Oatman version where the tribes that like to claim the cliff dwellings, right? The tribes that say, oh yeah, it's not the, they called them the Apaches back then, but it wasn't the Apaches. It was the Yavapai Indians. The Yavapai Indians saying that, oh yeah, we made those, our ancestors made those cliff dwellings that are far advanced beyond anything we've done for 1,000 years. It's like, well, then you probably didn't make them. That was probably someone else, because you live in like a pile of sticks. And if you live in a pile of, like, what did you do? Go backwards? You devolved? You went from living in a stone castle on a mountainside to a pile of sticks? Because why exactly? And they can never answer those questions, right? They're always trying to come up with, well, maybe disease or something. And that's the excuse they give you for this. They say the settlers brought with them smallpox and spread disease. Well, first of all, to the extent that did happen, I'm sure to some extent it did, that wasn't something intentional. And how do we know it didn't work the other way around? You trying to tell me that the Native Americans didn't have diseases before white people showed up? And that some of those diseases might have been diseases that the white people didn't have any immunities to? How is it that Europe is just some petri dish of disease and in North America there's like, oh, viruses don't exist in North America? They say the Indians didn't have a concept of land and of borders. Well, maybe it's because of their way of life. Maybe because they didn't evolve to that. You know who else doesn't have a concept of land and borders? Is fucking chimpanzees. That's a step in the stairway of civilization. Is establishing and protecting your soil. If you're just living in piles of sticks and roaming about eating nuts you find on the ground and occasionally killing a deer or something like that, really, what exactly, let's just be honest here, what exactly is separating you from the rest of the animals? Great apes have societies. Great apes have hierarchies, to some degree, language. And this idea that the immigrants that come here today to feast upon the fruit of the tree that your ancestors planted is ridiculous. And the only reason they get away with it is most white people don't know their own history. A lot of white people in America, this isn't their history. Quite frankly, a lot of white people that live in America today, their ancestors maybe did come here under similar circumstances to the immigrants today. Came here after people like Mary Rowlandson established a foothold here and carved a civilization out of the wilderness. The difference there is these are people that are tied to us by blood. Many of the European immigrants that came here, even after the civilization was built up, didn't come here and immediately start undermining it. Some of them did. But they all learned English pretty quick. They all assimilated pretty quick. And the reason why is pretty simple. Even if it was a different brand, they had compatible hardware. They might not have all been capable of running all the same programs, all the same software, to the same degree that the hardware that was designed for that software could run it. But it was compatible. It worked. Sometimes there were error messages, but it worked. Immigrants that aren't from Europe that have come here, especially in the last 30, 40 years, it's a completely different story. First of all, their hardware isn't compatible with the software. And so what's required, right? The developers, if you will, are constantly having to deploy patches, trying to make it work on the shitty other fucking hardware that it's not compatible with, and it makes it run shittier for everybody else. But not only that, the immigrants that are coming today, I mean, the European immigrants that would come here, even I'd say several decades ago, not just centuries ago, but several decades ago, they weren't given 5-star hotels to live out of with debit cards that gave them free food, or even just welfare benefits to supply their EBT cards to pay for their endless children. They came here, and they got jobs, and they worked, and they became Americans. So anyway, I just thought it'd be fun to take a look at maybe the first captivity narrative, as it were. And like I said, there's hundreds like this, and they're all first-hand accounts. They're all not all of them, I guess, are. They're not all. I mean, if they don't survive, obviously, it's not a first-hand account. But many of them are first-hand accounts of actual survivors of captivity from Native Americans. They all have a very similar story arc. It's all the same. Indians get pissed off about, out of jealousy, really, is what it is. They want what the white people have. They're unable to produce it themselves. Often the white people are trying to reason with them and barter with them and help them, give them things. But the Native Americans only understand one language, and that's violence and dominance. And so they're opportunists. They attack, usually, the most helpless. That's almost always the same part of the storyline. In an effort to get Gibbs, they go after a wagon train, a defenseless wagon train on the Oregon Trail. Another runner-up for tonight's stream was a story of a family that was coming from Canada to go on the Oregon Trail. And same story. 200 Indians, all ready for battle, because they heard that there was a Oregon Trail. They called it the white man's holy road. And they knew it was easy pickings. They knew they could go down there and basically just spawn camp the Oregon Trail, because it would just be helpless families in the middle of fucking nowhere, hundreds of miles from any kind of military presence or law enforcement or anything like that. And it would just be free Gibbs. Little loot boxes coming across the country. Covered wagons full of goodies and women they could rape. We might go over that some other time, but it was 200 Indians just go down there and at first they play nice. They say, hey, why don't we sit down and smoke them the peace pipe? Have some food. And the white people are like, well, we don't have a choice. There's like 200 of you. And you all have hatchets and bows and arrows and shit. And we've got like 3 guns between the 12 of us. So, okay. And the next thing you know, they've killed all the men, half the children and women, and they've got slaves. Who, if they survive, write one of these captivity narratives that they now today have to try to square with their narrative, the nobility narrative. But it doesn't. It doesn't square with that. So they tell you that your ancestors that suffered through all this hardship, in addition to having to deal with those kinds of circumstances, they're big fat liars. They're big fat racist liars. Even though these are probably some of the most religious white people to have ever lived. Probably some of the most courageous, hardworking, moral people, let alone white people, to have ever lived. Dealing with, quite frankly, some of the most savage, evil, soulless people, if you can call them that ever lived. And you're supposed to feel bad because the kinds of people that are capable of the behavior you just heard about didn't understand what land was or something. Which, by the way, they did. Because it wasn't until they changed kings that all of a sudden we didn't get it. Well, your last guy got it. We didn't have a problem with him. He understood the deal. Reminds me of that Phil Hartman caveman lawyer skit from ancient SNL days. I'm just a caveman. I don't understand all your crazy electronic devices. That's a reference not a lot of people are going to know, unless you're old. But that's the game they would play. They play ignorance. Well, we didn't know any better. I like how their excuse is we were fucking too stupid to like understand even like the most basic concepts required for a civilization to operate. Like maybe they were. But all the more reason I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. Even if you were tricked out of your land or it was stolen outright. The kinds of people capable of the things that we read about like this, they don't deserve to live. They deserve to be wiped out. Otherwise, in another 20,000 years, it'd be the same fucking horrific bullshit going on in this continent. Anyway, that's I know it's a little shorter tonight. I smashed my finger. I had to type with one hand today. I didn't realize how much that would handicap me. I was sawing some wood with one of those, what is it, like a reciprocating saw? What's the saw that's like got the jabby blade that just goes in and out? Anyway, whatever those are called. I think it's a reciprocating saw, right? And it jumped, got out of my hand and smashed my, like, luckily I didn't get cut like that, but like the part that moves up and down, like, smashed my fucking left middle finger like 3 or 4 times in rapid succession before I get it to turn off. I'm hoping my fingernail doesn't fall off. It's one of the, if you've ever shut your finger in a door or something like that before, I've had that happen where it turns all purple and then it's all super nasty because it falls off. I mean, it grows back obviously, but it's all purple and nasty right now. I'm like, don't fall off. Hang in there. Hang in there, fingernail. But like, yeah, all day long I would go to like type and like, fuck. Have to go back to just one-handed typing. Oh man. Yeah. I'm trying to get some stuff done, and the weather's kind of nice now. Weather's kind of nice. It's we get a little bit of that. We get a little bit of that in the desert. This is the time where you're like, yeah, I like living here.